Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Shadow of the Erdtree. I'm back pretty quick this time with a new Things You Didn't Know episode, focused of course on the DLC, and as usual we aim to showcase weird, interesting or useful things, and a big part of that is the community finds and the comments on these very videos, which anytime we draw from anything, we'll be crediting and talking about that too. So with that said, let's just get started. First up though, a lore topic that I've been thinking about that I really like. Something I was wondering about when watching the original cinematic, the story one for the DLC, was this scene right here. This mysterious figure with a long pole of some kind, cradling it almost like they've lost someone and this is their remains. It does make me think like maybe they're holding the remains of a pole that might have previously held a flag at the top. Maybe the representation of the crucible, like a flag or nation tied to that, whoever or whatever it is truly being purged here, that we do think it's the crucible. Most of that story cinematic by comparison is quite straightforward, at least baseline. Marika taking the original power that led her to become the god queen we know today, the purge of the former order that was in charge as the golden order takes over by force, and then our current story with Miquella and his footsteps and the mysterious acts that he's doing that we're going to follow and try and understand. But yeah, throughout that there was this scene with the one unnamed shadowy figure clutching at something in the flames during the purge. It's something that felt very on the nose and obvious and yet was unexplained and something I was actually uncertain about. Frankly, my best guess at the time was that it's going to be an important character we'll meet, maybe it'll be a boss fight, maybe even a major character revealed late in the DLC. We'll see. Now we've had the DLC though and been playing, who was it? Well yes, it does seem like it was a boss. It would appear that the unnamed figure was Romina, the saint of the Bud, in all her horrible scarlet rot glory. Obviously, she's quite changed now, so let's take a look at the lore, starting with her remembrance specifically. After the church was burned to the ground, Romina discovered a twisted divine element, which she weaved into the baleful scarlet rot. Perhaps then the buds might find somewhere to gain purchase once more within the scorched remains. So, if Romina was that shadowy dark figure in the midst of the purge, then whatever she was holding there in that moment must have been this twisted divine element, which she then used to create this new baleful scarlet rot that also turned her into that weird mix of scorpion and centipede. But what was that element? Whatever it was certainly the weapon she ends up using in the boss fight. And that is this, the poleblade of the Bud. Currently a pretty terrible weapon in the PvE meta, but let's actually look at the description here. Weapon of Romina, Saint of the Bud. A scarlet glaive with a dangling bud-like blade. Attacks cause build-up of rot, and once in the crumbling, burning church, Romina held the Bud in speechless silence. That bud would become her blade. So this poleblade was literally the scarlet rot bud somehow. How would she find it there suddenly anyway? Was her church actually some kind of scarlet rot worshipping faction? With the outer god of rot existing, it could have just been another enemy of the Golden Order that they were also targeting in the midst of this. We see some reference to that in the incantation, rotten butterflies, also from her remembrance. The scarlet butterflies are as the goddesses of rot's wings. Bereft of her master at that time, they were soothed by Romina, who reached out to them. So it's not necessarily the case that Romina is the goddess of rot, but she harnessed the power of that outer god. And so when this bud that became a weapon was saved, the church became the church of this bud rather than say the outer god of rot for the meantime. But yeah, it's just something that stuck out to me when I first watched that story cinematic. It is nice to have that finally answered. Let me know if there's anything you could add to this topic in the comments. Alright, lore talk finished. Here's just a very actionable tip for you. Are you using the best summon in the game, the Mimic tier, or plan to again use it in the future? Wow, how very original of you. So just like everyone else then, you want to maximize your Mimic tier. With that in mind, I'd strongly recommend you use the consumable equip bar here to make sure you have the best options possible for your Mimic tier. Whether it's damage boost or negation options, having these equipped is pretty damn important. But particularly, I'm talking about this new one, Blessing of Marika, which completely restores HP and heals all ailments the moment you drink it. This is simply a one-use full heal, and there's very few in the DLC for the purpose of that. Best used in a final fight or scenario where if you don't drink it, you're gonna die, and if you do drink it, you actually kill the boss. So just be warned, for the next minute or so, I'll be showing the final boss footage where I'm demonstrating this topic. If that's gonna bother you, make sure you skip this. Back on point, you need to have this on your consumable bars, like so, even if you plan to never ever use it if you're using the Mimic tier summon. If you're unaware or maybe you've just forgotten, the Mimic tier replicates what you have, your items, your gear, your weapon, and also your consumables, the ones that are currently equipped anyway. Like I've shown here, there's all kinds of buffing food that could be really good. Final fight wise, it could be a huge damage negation for Holy in particular, or it could be damage increases, or even extra heals. And so that's what this is of course about, the Blessing of Marika, which is the ultimate heal. The Mimic Tier will randomly use these and it'll just make it stronger, more survivable. When the Mimic Tier gets low and you have this equipped, it'll either use a single heal flask, right? Healing it for a chunk but not the full health bar, or it'll use one of these Blessings of Marika when they're equipped. It'll pop it and get that full heal, which you can see happens in my first ever kill of the final boss. It actually did that on the side. It was awesome. Knowing that this can be used by your Mimic Tier if you equip it, I would never run a Mimic Tier without at least having one of these equipped on my bars, because why wouldn't I want it to have an extra full heal? So I'd always keep at least one of these left over for a playthrough for that purpose. Okay, so next up we have a fun one. Last time I highlighted a neat post by the Twitter user Zolowski, who I can never appreciate enough. They're someone who takes pictures of the games that they're into, and there's been some great reveals by them for Elden Ring in its release days. Through their methods though, they reveal details we often miss, thanks to free camera or even removing pieces of equipment from characters, which is what we talked about last time. In particular, we were talking about Jolene and what she looked like, which is simply just really cool. But over the last week or so, Zolowski did the same for a bunch of the major NPCs with complete storylines with in the DLC. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of them. First up, we have Freyja here, who is the NPC that represents Radahn. When we look at her unmasked though, she does seem like a simple sort. She has this scar on her mask, and that's represented here on her nose with whatever's hidden there. I would assume it's like a blade from one of Millennia's warriors, the Cleanrot Knights, because it looks like she's got a little scar, puckering or blemishes or spots of a little bit of scarlet rot buildup there. A pretty cool subtle detail. And if you really want to talk about simple saw, look at Dryleaf Dane's real face. My man is a brick wall. If his fists and feet don't work, I could definitely see him using his chin. He's like a Chad Patches or something. A little bit concerning here is Moore, the very simple character in his dialogue. He does look kind of sad forever, doesn't he? But my favorite by far is Ansbach, who's become actually quite a popular NPC because of his amazing storyline and the stuff to do with Moog. The true appearance of him is quite regal. Aged, sure, but there's something very stoic in his appearance that I really like. Isn't it crazy how much the devs put into these character visuals, their designs, only to completely hide them from us in game, like we'd never see them otherwise? They fit the characters fantastically down to the little details, and you can tell it's also done in the regular character editor, so we could recreate these characters if we wanted to. So huge props and shout out again to Zolowski. Please check them out. There's a lot they showcase that I don't show in the hopes that you'll go have a look. Alright, next up, I want to quickly highlight something really useful to know for the full game and the DLC in particular. Before the release of the DLC, a topic I brought up in a video was how Sacred Blade, or Holy-based Ash of War, could have extremely good potential in the DLC. As I highlighted at that time, it's an Ash of War that can be applied to many kinds of weapons, and it will fire off a Holy Arc at medium range on use, which also applies a temporary Holy buff to the weapon. Very simple, very effective, especially when you're dealing with enemies weak to Holy. In the original game, that was basically those that live in death, skeletons who'd be instantly killed with no revive, or insanely effective against the Deathbird bosses. And as it turns out in the DLC, there absolutely are more of those enemy types, from skeletons, the undead, and there's even a Deathbird again. But also, there's a new enemy type that can be pesky, the Ghost Flame Dragons, and they're ultra weak to this. And on top of that, there's an entirely new weapon type, the Black Steel Weapons, which each come with this unique passive. The weapons come with base holy damage, but in the description it tells us they have increased holy damage if you augment them with more holy damage. So holy damage base, use this ash to make the weapon sacred, so even more, and then the ash deals holy damage, and then it buffs the weapon with even more. So enemies that are weak to that will be destroyed by these weapons, buffed with Sacred Blade. The potency of the Black Steel Weapons and dealing with undead is criminal, so absolutely slap this ash onto a backup weapon, probably a Black Steel one, and pull it out whenever you need to. They're so good. Finally, I'm going up an elevator for this last little topic. And it's going to be talking about the map of the DLC, the Land of Shadow, but also compared to the original one, the lands between. Because that big question in the lead up to the DLC, and hell, even still now, where is the Land of Shadow? How does it exist? When we take a look at this realm, this Land of Shadow, and compare it to the original map, there's actually this massive chunk of the lands between that is indeed missing. And there's this whole theory about maybe it's under this cloud, or that's where we're going to access it. And if you remember the divine towers that are all over the place, forming a kind of hexagon shape with the cloud at the center. And that big question of, okay, what's under the cloud? Why is there a giant cloud in the middle of the map? As we go back to the map of the DLC, this lines up with the suppressing pillar, that mysterious tower that lets you see nearly all of the DLC from one location. It's incredible. But again, the positioning of the suppressing pillar surprisingly seems centered on the original map. So let's look at the DLC map and the original map overlaid. It does look like that massive gap in the center is nicely filled in. This comes from a great post by Reddit user Gilliam Yeager, who made this quick GIF to highlight how it impressively lines up. It does make you think maybe the lands of Shadow were somehow separated from the lands between. And with this comparison, again, you can see the suppressing pillar, that huge tower, right at the center. How does the suppressing tower play a role in this? If we were to destroy this tower, would something happen? Would it reconnect the two lands? It just feels like this tower is a big deal. So let me know what you think about this topic in general. But there you have it, a quick look at some different topics with a bit more lore discussion especially. Be sure to drop any suggestions for the series that you might want me to talk about, or follow-ups even on the topics today in the comments. We might just talk about it. But for now, I've been Hollow, you've been you, and thank you for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.